Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles episode review. This one is going to be for Season 4, Episode 22, The Power Inside Her. And this was actually a really good episode. I'll say that straight off the bat. I expected this to be one of the better episodes of the season because just the description we had for what this episode was going to be seemed very April focused, and depending on how they executed it, I kind of had a feeling like they usually do the April stuff okay anyway, so whatever they're setting up here, I think will be reasonably well done, and that actually turned out to be true. The only issue, I think, with this episode is that this should have been an arc, a character arc for April, as opposed to one episode. Now, admittedly, it has been going on for a little bit, and that we've had like one or two moments in previous episodes, and it's a setup from much earlier on in this season. But fundamentally, this is the episode that basically brings it up and deals with it. I think we will get little bits and pieces with more focus on April going forward, but in general, I have a feeling that this is kind of like the end of this April being controlled by her powers arc and the reveals that we got about what that means in this episode. So I think that's the only thing, is just that this was a really interesting potential arc, and they bring it up, resolve it in this episode, and we're kind of back to the same spot. We're like, oh, you've just dealt with that within one episode. Now all of a sudden, one of the most interesting things going on with the series right now is resolved. Where are you going next? You haven't really said anything else kind of overly important up. Where's the kind of focus of the series now? That's the only thing. The show has done stuff like this before, where it's like, oh, cool, interesting arc they're setting up, and then they immediately resolve it straight away. The way I kind of wanted this to be done is that you kind of drag it out a little bit, it takes over a little bit more. Maybe just have a couple of episodes where April is just off around the place doing stuff. You don't that you can't deal with her within one episode. That she just kind of gets away. She's too powerful, and you get some kind of character focus of just April and Xanaron kind of just basically fighting within each other back and forth, and you kind of get focus on April that way. You develop the villain of Xanaron. You could give better insight into the little bit of backstory that they do give in this episode about what exactly was going on, and just in general stuff like that. When you have the big moments of the turtles really kind of trying to get through to April. If this had been built up for a few more episodes, the whole idea of imagine ending an episode with Donatello assumed dead. Imagine that Donatello was just absent in that way for a couple of episodes. Imagine the impact that would have in the series. And it was still a really strong moment. I absolutely will say that. I was like, whoa, April just exploded Donatello. Obviously they later reveal it was kind of taking him apart molecular level, but still pretty crazy what she was about to do. And then Raph nearly suffered the same fate. It's just a lot of things where they put almost too much in this episode, that they could have made this better, the moments of this episode better, by pacing them out over the course of a few episodes. Have dealing with April and this thing be a couple of episodes, and that's the only thing. It feels like they did decent setup for this arc, and they did a good episode to resolve it. It's just I kind of wanted them to do a bit more than with it, and it's a frustrating thing with this series where I feel it can't find that balance between having stuff happen and then actually it can't find the balance between having stuff happen and then the stuff that happens kind of having a lasting kind of impact. Usually, obviously, the show tends to not really have any overly important character arcs. As I said, the Turtles don't have a lot going on. Splinter, Shredder, that's been a focus this season. April, a kind of minor focus, and then we're big focus here. But it's one of those things where you finally decide to commit to that arc, and then you don't really kind of give it enough time. But in general, it doesn't take away too much from the episode for me, because there are so many great moments. I like the suddenness of how this episode starts. It's just like, okay, we're finally doing some proper tests on April. She's still being very kind of careful with the Soul Star fragment, and isn't letting kind of Donatello anywhere near it. And you can tell that is kind of part of like the way April feels, and it's not just the influence of the spirit inside this thing, Xanaron. That is having an influence elsewhere, but fundamentally, like, part of this episode is trying to get across that April kind of assisted this in happening to some degree, because she became super protective of that, and she let her reliance on it kind of take over. That, to some extent, instead of trying to like really develop her own powers and learn how to control them herself, she just relied on the star being able to kind of amplify and control her powers. And the result after this is basically that, because kind of Xanaron used April's powers to like an insane degree, April just kind of being there as someone who was in complete control of her powers, kind of experienced what it is to have control, and so now has a sense of what that control actually means, as she demonstrates at the end. So I get the sense now that we'll see kind of April incorporate her powers a little bit more, in that like it'll be like Ninja April using the powers more effectively, whereas in the last couple of episodes it's been April basically almost completely using the powers and very little of the ninja skills. So I think we'll see a little bit more balanced April going forward, outside of what happens in this episode. Other thing, the only other minor complaint I had about the episode was just that, in terms of an explanation, in terms of having to refer back to like where exactly this came from, because it was a much earlier episode in the season where this came from with the Aeons and stuff like that, that was insanely quick, the explanation that they gave for this. That like, oh, I was one of the original 7 Aeons, and we eventually became too powerful. We're sealed in the Soul Star. I put myself into one of the fragments and then gained control over April's powers. It was just like, okay, you showed us a tiny bit of this, but like, as I said, make that arc a little bit bigger. Establish the whole thing of like, what the 7 original Aeons, what's that about? Like, go in depth into that. Establish more the relationship between April and Xanaron, and so on. It could have been like amazing. It could have been really, really good. It's just little aspects of this episode hold it back from being like utterly amazing, though comparatively to what this show is, this episode was, I think, one of the best of the entire series, because it did so many good things. Casey was actually really, really competent in this episode, which I really appreciated. That the turtles were a little bit late getting to the situation, and he wanted to stop them from getting that mutagen to Shredder to impact him and slow him down, and so he just had to go through with it on his own. But instead of just completely getting himself into trouble, he controlled that fight for a little bit, just because he had the advantage. Like they were the ones trying to protect the mutagen, so he had the advantage attacking them. And just how he was attacking the bots, he got the upper advantage on Tiger Claw, and was Fish Face or whatever his name is. He used his various weaponry on him. He used his final space arc hockey puck bomb, which was in a really cool slow-mo sequence. Obviously, right towards the end of the episode, the car crashed and everyone caught up with him, and that's the big April moment. And just transitioning from April, like Casey was doing some really cool stuff, and then like, okay, here's one of the most powerful beings we've seen in this universe, like full power April assisted by Xanaron, just able to annihilate people, toss them around, no effort, able to disintegrate people into molecular level, basically, as she does with Donatello, which, that was, as I said, really shocking moment, just that they committed to doing that and didn't like pause it, just stop it from happening. Admittedly, I kind of thought what they were potentially going to do with this episode was like, are they finally going to commit to really, really doing something with any sort of a relationship between April and Donatello? Just get across even more that these two have a more important bond than like April and any of the other turtles. Just the fact that they focused so much on like Donatello and him potentially being able to get through to April was a big thing. They didn't quite go in that direction, and it's still like obviously one of the complaints about the series that they kind of have set up this romance plot that they've just done nothing with. But what they did do with this was just in terms of the friendship of April and Donatello, just establish that kind of her letting herself become obsessed with the Soul Star and to some extent relying on this power basically led to the death of Donatello, and she just completely blames herself for that. And that was a big thing for a character in this show to kind of feel the pain of having basically been responsible for killing someone who you're really close to. That's something kind of different. That's big that they haven't really done that before. And then especially when she almost injures Splinter even more, that you start to hear like the cracks and stuff like that. They're definitely doing a lot more dark stuff with the like fighting and stuff like that with regards to like bones breaking and stuff like that, and that like Raph nearly got like all of his limbs broken, Splinter nearly got his arm broken, he's already had his leg broken, and stuff like that. So that was definitely interesting. Anything else in the episode? I think the villain in the end was a little bit like, that was the most underdeveloped aspect of the episode. It was just the fact that they went through the backstory of Xanaron so quickly, and then when eventually April breaks the Soul Star and Xanaron comes out in her own physical form, and then you just have that really quick showdown of like April defeats the demon inside her, and you reference that at the end. That, to me, didn't have a ton of impact because it was all contained within the one episode. I think that would have been an amazingly powerful moment of April using her own skill, her own power, defeating the person who's had control of her for potentially a couple of episodes, just using her own skill. That would have been so impactful coming at the end of a like 2-3 episode arc. She's been through all of this stuff. This is the person who has forced her to like kill Donatello, injure her sensei, hurt her friends, and all this sort of stuff. And it's just the final moment of just April finally getting a chance to face, the villain that kind of has been her up to this point in time. It's just a little bit of a missed opportunity within the series with this episode, but I also want to make it really clear that this is a really, really good episode. It's just, this could have been a really, really good 2, 3, 4 episodes, maybe more if they really committed to it, and that's the biggest frustration for me with this one. So very kind of different kind of tonally review this time out compared to the previous ones, but it just really shows that when this show commits to doing something of note with a character and doing it well, that there's kind of not a lot to say outside of the positives really for an episode. And so episode 22 here did its job. As far as I'm aware, we're kind of on a break now. We don't really know when the show is coming back for the last 4 episodes. I'm not really sure. Like, we obviously had this episode. I'm almost thinking that we're kind of done maybe until the new year, but I don't really know exactly what way they're going to approach airing the last few episodes. Because, like, obviously the way it worked kind of last time out was that the premiere of season 4 was in October, and we're kind of well past that now just because of how many delays there's been in this season. So we'll have to wait and see. But just overall final thoughts on the power inside her. Really, really strong episode. Definitely I would highlight this as one of the best of the entire series. Well animated, great action, kind of some strong emotional moments, focused on a character arc, a decent setup from in previous episodes to build to it. The only real problems going against it are, to sum up, the backstory of like who Xanaron is being explained super quickly and not really being shown all that well, and also the fact that this could have been like a really cool multiple episode arc, but they did it all in one episode. So yeah, in the comments, let me know your thoughts were on this episode, and I'll just end by saying link in the description to my Twitter and Tumblr account if you want to follow me on social media. Links also in the description to my Patreon campaign and also my PayPal donation link if you want to help support my channel so I can make more videos, better videos. So that's been a video. Thanks for watching, and bye.